Welcome to Belonging at the Top, driving performance through people. The podcast where leadership gets real and people come first. Your hosts are Dr. Natalie Parks, psychologist, behavior analyst, best-selling author, and your go-to expert for dismantling systems of injustice while building equitable, high-performing teams. And Anthony Butler, leadership coach, thought leader, speaker, and master of helping leaders unlock their team's full potential, one breakthrough at a time. Together, they're here to tackle your toughest leadership challenges with just the right mix of science, strategy, and a sprinkle of humor. In this episode, Anthony and Natalie share their experiences managing grief during the holidays while providing tips for leaders to help them navigate the difficulty of leading team members with feelings of amplified loss during a celebratory season.
Hello. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Belonging at the Top. We are here to talk about the paradox of December and the holidays and all of the things that the holidays and the end of the year bring together. The uncomfortable truth about December, probably November and December, the end of the year holidays, is that we are in the middle of holiday season. No matter what your practices are or your cultural beliefs or religious beliefs, we are in that season and it is everywhere. Every store you go to, every TV show you watch, it is all there. And what we know is that this season can really amplify grief as opposed to making us feel together. I think what is put out there is that it's a time for connection and celebration and everyone should feel happy and all of those things. But as we enter into all of those and we have loved ones that we are missing, we have grief that is recent or even grief from the past, it all tends to surface and be amplified through this season. And so we want to take some time and talk about that really as a leader who is leading a team, understanding that your team members are probably, some of them are managing their grief right now during the season, but also you as a leader may be managing your grief through this season.
Exactly. For me, prior to this year, the paradox of December was always just the environmental stuff. The days are shorter. It's, depending on where you are, it can be dark as early, like pitch black dark as early as 4:45 p.m. until 7 a.m. the next day. So you got long nights. And then there's the people who suffer from SAD, the seasonal affective disorder that kicks in. So then if you're one of those people and then you're dealing with either the anniversary of or the recognition of that a loved one is no longer here in the holiday season, it can be overwhelming. And so I think this is a great episode for us to do. And I think we should probably at least give our listeners some insight who don't already know that we both had tragic losses this year. So this is personal for us. And I would say every episode is personal because we're either telling something we've experienced, we either coached through, but this is personal on an emotional level. So give us some grace this episode. If you hear us crash out, if it makes the final edit, it's because, again, we both, specifically both, and Natalie, if you don't mind me sharing, we both lost our fathers this year. Natalie earlier this year, my father last month in November, and my uncle. So we are living through this as we speak. So I think, yeah, if I'm correct, yeah, this is your first holiday without your father, right, Natalie?
Yep. It's the first one.
Yeah. So this is something that ironically, that we had planned on doing before my losses. This was me kind of being there for my partner and saying, hey, we should probably talk about that. Maybe to help you through the holiday. We had a whole other plan. We're going to bring her sister on. And then my stuff happened. Then it was like,
Yeah.
So this is us getting back on track. So again, for the fans who follow us and you wonder where we went for 2 months, that's where we went. I was off the grid.
Yeah.
I was off.
Yeah. And I think that's one, even just that, the importance of that. My father passed away in January, and the holiday season brings something else because both my children were born in January and February, and my second child was born on my father's birthday, and he passed away just weeks before their first shared birthday together. So my holiday season is going to extend well into the new year as a result of that. But I've had a little bit of time and space and figured out a new normal life. And what I'm seeing now is that as the holiday season is coming up and my family is going to be getting together very soon, and I've been starting to think about what void will be there. Anthony, I know it's much fresher for you, and I can only imagine kind of the freshness of just having the grief in addition to what the holidays bring is probably exacerbating that for you. So I think, as Anthony said, like, definitely give us a little grace. We are showing up for all of you, but we're also showing up for each other.
Exactly. And I think that's why one of the first things we should talk about is like how, as a leader, how do you show up when you're the one experiencing the grief? I think it's two ways to look at it. How do you show up for others? And then how do you show up when you're experiencing it? So I think that's the key thing there. And I was reading something the other day, and I think the loss of a parent is one of those things that you really don't understand until it's your turn. And I think for most of us, we will have that turn. It's coming. We just don't know when or how. But for most of us, according to the circle of life, our parents should go before we do. But if that does happen, then you will experience this at some point. And I think, and it's not, so now I'm one of those people. I hadn't experienced it. Still, my mom's still here. Your mom's still here. So I'm like, oh, I'm sorry for your loss. And what can I do to help? And are you okay? What can we do? Let me sit in this grief with you. You can say all that and say all the right things until it happens. And you're like, that shit don't mean nothing. You're like,
At all.
and you're like, what? What are you saying?
Don't say
How
with
am
me.
I? Right. You got both your parents. So there's two sides of it, right? It's having that empathy for others. Like we always tell people as a leader that you should do some introspection, know how you lead, know what you are, know what your triggers are. This is one of those spaces you have to experience to figure out what that is. And I think still you can experience grief with your friends, maybe loss of a partner, but I still think parental grief, loss of a parent is going to be something a bit different. So whatever that grief is for you, not to diminish or to minimize the loss of other people in your lives, because the loss of a close friend or of a partner is still very significant. But whatever that is, you still got to be able to figure out what works for you and how you show up. So there's some examples from when I was telling my inner circle of folks what was happening. We got into talks about, what do you need? I know some people who their grief, as they expressed it, was, I just need somebody to sit with me. We ain't got to talk. TV can be on. We can watch Netflix. Don't have to really say much, but I need you to sit, literally, physically sit in it with me. That's why you can understand like the practice of sitting Shiva. That's what that's about, right? It's really just being there in the moment. Other people were like, yeah, I cook. So what you need? I had lasagna for like a good 6 weeks. I had lasagna, baked ziti, and pasta. I ate pasta for about 6 weeks. And I'm fine with that. Thank you for those friends who showed up for me in that way and who still called to check up on me. Those are things that how different people process it. So it's one of those things you as a leader, if you can, this is a different kind of stress, figuring out what space you need and take the time, take the space to do it. And so I think if you can, I think the key thing here as a leader is that whatever you do, whatever that practice or policy, the practice is for you, that you can turn into a practice that you can model for your team, I think is good. So if it's taking a mental health day or week or month, whatever it may be, I think you need to be able to do that and model it for your team and be transparent enough to say, this is why I'm doing it. So they know that this is the kind of environment where that's appreciated and it's accepted and it's allowed. You can really foster that, again, that psychological safety as they're going to go through changes in life and loss in life, that they are at a place where it can be supported by their team.
I think that the key here is really doing everything you can to show up in the way the other person needs. I will say, as I was thinking about you, and one of our guests before is a good friend of mine, Dr. Grove, once said to me, like, I try not to ask people, what do you need in those moments? Because in those moments, I recognize that they don't know what they need. And that she said that to me many, many, many years ago. I don't even remember what it was in relation to. It wasn't even maybe something as big as what we're talking about right now, but it stuck with me. And I had the loss of my father earlier this year, but a few years ago in 2021, I had the loss of my child. And so I remember in both of those moments, they both happened around the same time, interestingly. But, people were like, what do you need? What do you need? Like, everybody wanted to do something. And I was like, well, I'm the person who cooks for my family. So I told everybody, like, just send me food. And then I had like all this food I didn't know what to do with. And I recognize that like people want to be there,
Mhm.
right? So if you know someone going through it, if you're a leader and one of your employees, you know that they're going through it, or maybe one of your leaders is going through it and you want to show up for them, it's nice to ask, what do you need? But the reality of it is most people don't know what they need in those moments. And so sometimes you have to just take that initiative. And I would say, at least for me, and maybe not everybody, sometimes it's just the nice gesture. So a lot of people just wrote me cards and they were like, I know, nothing can take this away, but I want you to know I'm here and I'm thinking about you. I'm sending you prayers, all of those things. And that is something that like I have held on to those notes for you
Yeah.
know, it hasn't been that long, but
No,
I
it's
will
still
hold on to them.
each day it seems like
So
almost like an eternity. Like you don't know what to do and where to go, where to move, how to move, right?
right.
So I think those are they are keys to help you get through it.
Yeah. And then I think Anthony, as you said, doing a lot of that introspection. I am the type of person, Anthony, as I think you are, like I turn inward,
Mhm.
right? I kind of put distance and space between myself and others, and I kind of isolate myself. And to an extent, I need that, but that's also where it's comfortable, right? Like if I'm by myself and nobody is looking at my face and trying to see if I'm sad or I'm going to cry about something or get mad about something or whatever, then I don't really have to deal with it in the same way. I don't have to worry about showing emotion around other people, which is an uncomfortable thing for me. But I also know that I have to put a limit on that, right? And so I'm lucky in that I have friends that are fairly pushy and they don't let me just go away into a hole of isolation for a long period of time. But recognize that sometimes the things we want to do, it's that protective nature, but it's not always the best thing for us. And
Especially
so
if
I
you are
think
the
it's
leader, right?
being
So in this
effective.
case, I'm going to extend leadership. We normally talk about leaders in the work perspective, but if you are the head of household, you still are a leader and you still got to manage that as well. You just can't be locked in
Right.
your bedroom where the kids are running wild, fending for themselves, being feral in the streets like we were as Gen Xers, right? That we can't do that
Right.
anymore.
No more Gen
No more
Xers
Gen
as
Xers.
kids.
Yay for us though. But no, but I think that's what if you are in a home environment and you're leading the home and you got to figure that out, and you're going through the grief or you're helping someone go through it, or at work, I think that the key there is to acknowledge your loss to folks so they can see that you are human and you are feeling it as well. And especially for those leaders who are, what we call the type A leaders, the ones who are always the fixers, which I think is what people ask us specifically, what do you need? We always have the answers, or we think we got the answers, right? And so
We do.
for one to be like, and this is for me, I was like, I don't know what I need. I really, and that was a response I told a couple people. I don't know. I haven't been here. I don't know what this is. I don't know what I need. And so I like Christina's comment, like, that's sometimes you got to just the offer, just show up, just do whatever that you think will. And I can't say that in my experience, there was nothing that was done that I didn't ask for that I rejected. Right. So I think
Right.
people appreciate whatever that effort is. Sending a basket, showing up, just say, hey, I brought a bottle, let's drink and watch a movie. No one did that for me yet, but I'm waiting on it. So y'all, bring a bottle.
Right? Me either.
Bring a bottle.
Where's my mom?
We can drink through this grief too. Kidding, but not. But I think that's one way as leaders.
If that's your thing and
If
you're
that's your thing.
responsible
And
about
people know
it.
I'm a
Yeah.
bourbon guy, so it wouldn't be unusual for someone to show up with a bottle for me. But I think that's one thing, again, I don't want this to turn into just a grief session for us, but that makes sure that we are actually, but I think
Helping people.
from a leadership perspective, make sure you're doing that. And this is the time of year people doing holiday parties. So if you know a team member or some folks are going through this grief, or even if they do have sad and they don't feel like they're affected by the season, start making these
Right.
events optional. Opt in for the event. Don't make them mandatory. Opt in for the events. Don't make it a mandatory Christmas or a holiday party where people have to show up and are looked at like weirdly if they don't, especially if they're going through something. But I think that's one way.
Right.
So I think we talk about strategies. It was you modeling the behavior, taking the time, taking the mental day, expressing what you're going through, not in a way that you're oversharing, but in a way that people can still, again, feel that you're human. Let them extend grace to you as a leader, because they will expect it and need it when it's their turn to go through it. And then just make these holiday functions, make them optional, make them opt-in only, create an environment where you give the
And truly
Hmm?
optional. Like I said, and truly
Truly
optional,
optional, right?
not you mentioned it, but we know there are all these optional things, after hours things that if you don't show up, it sends a very negative
Right.
message. These should be let's remove those negative implications of you not showing up.
Hmm. Yep, exactly. And even if it's not, another option could be maybe it's not a holiday celebration or holiday party. Maybe you transition it to or include an option that includes some kind of fundraising or giving back, where people feel like
Oh,
instead
that's
of
a really good idea.
celebrating and having a
Yeah,
party, that you're redirecting that energy to some things that your staff cares about, and or do a combination of all of them. And I think the other thing to start with
right.
is that acknowledging the season, right? So even if you have not experienced this kind of loss or this kind of grief, and you can't relate to what your clients or your parents, your staff is going through, start by saying, hey, y'all, it's a holiday season. We know it is this, all we're here to celebrate, and it's supposed to be a joyous period. It's not that for everyone. We want to acknowledge that. And if you are a person that really struggles through this season, that you're still welcome here. Your job is still secure. And anything we talk about moving forward is an opt-in. We'd love to have you there, but nothing is mandatory. So I think setting that
I love
tone
that.
at the start of the
Right.
holiday season, I'm traditionalist. The start of the holiday season starts the day after Halloween. All you people who are buying Christmas toys and putting
It
trees
starts
up in
September
August,
1st. What are you talking about?
who are putting trees up in August, September, something is wrong with you. But the day after Halloween is when my holiday season starts. So the Christmas
Okay.
trees only go
I'm
up.
even more of a traditionalist because I think each holiday should be celebrated in the month that it falls. So like
Exactly.
October is for
There you
Halloween,
go.
November is for
Thanksgiving.
Indigenous Day or
Right.
Thanksgiving, and December is for the religious
There you go.
holidays.
And Christmas trees should only
Um,
go up after Thanksgiving. If your Christmas tree was
yes,
up at Thanksgiving, I'm giving you a side eye.
we're
Before
judging
Thanksgiving.
you.
If you're eating Thanksgiving dinner and your Christmas tree was in the living room, you have a virtual side eye from me.
If it still gets dark at 8 o'clock and your Christmas tree is up, then we are
Right.
judging you. But
All right.
I think also one of the things thinking about work and especially thinking about you as a leader who is maybe dealing with some grief or dealing with sad or what have you, understand that there are some of us who do our best to kind of put our game face on. And there are many, many people who can show up to work and kind of compartmentalize and separate things out. But emotionally and how you show up still is a bit different.
Mhm.
Or triggers tend to be a little shorter or quicker. Your capacity for chaos or dysfunction tends to go down a little
Yep.
bit. You may react a little bit stronger than you typically would. And so I would just say, again, I think that comes into pay attention to yourself. But if you have someone at work that can pay attention to you as well, that's where a little bit of that vulnerability comes in. Saying, I'm showing up, I'm doing the best I can. I think I have this under control. I think I'm good, but it's the first of whatever,
Right.
or maybe it's the 10th of
Yeah.
whatever, maybe it's the 20th of whatever, but you have now recognized that there's a pattern in kind of how you show up during certain times. Let people know, but also keep an eye on that. And I'm going to give you the strategy of the pause. It is one of my favorite strategies for emotional responding and triggered responding. Is if you feel your heart rate increase suddenly, pause. I think one of the first indicators that there is emotion that is about to follow, whether that is sadness or fear or anger, our bodies respond physiologically fairly similar.
Yep.
And you may have a different tell. For a lot of people, it's their heart rate starts to either pound harder or faster. And if you notice that, just pause for a minute before you respond to anything, whether that's like sending an email back, whether somebody asks you for the 10th time the same freaking question over and over again,
That's a whole other
or
show.
said
That annoys
something
me
that
even
is,
without going through grief.
was that right? I mean, it is a good one, but maybe pay more attention to that pause, right? And it just gives you a minute to get a hold of yourself, take that deep, deep breath, which slows your heart rate back down. And if we can physiologically kind of calm our bodies, then our ability to respond appropriately or in the way that we want to goes up drastically.
Yeah.
So just understanding that sometimes your body and the physiological response is going to be there even when you're putting your game face on to everyone
I think
else.
doing that, allowing yourself to do that, practicing that skill allows you to have a process that even if you don't understand the why yet of why it's happening, what's triggering you, what is it? Is it grief? Is it loss? Is it the absence? Is whatever it may be, that something has triggered you that is giving you this physiological response is key, is all you need to know at that point. You can debrief yourself later. You can look back at the moment and figure out, what was it that caused me to have that physiological response? Why did I respond that way? But if you're having that response, don't ignore it. I think that's a great tool, not only to use just in this phase, but in almost anything. If you're dealing with some conflict at work or a situation and it's either with a peer or a boss or a client or whatever it may be, that pause is critical. And I think most of us have probably learned that pause. We know it when conflict, we know it when in an argument, we know when to take away moment to step away. We've been trained to do that, but I don't think we've had this conversation about using that same skill set when it's grief related or sadness related or feeling some sense of loss or absence. We haven't talked about those things typically in a leadership format. This is why I wanted to really push and do this episode, because in a way we're following our own advice, right? We have to push forward.
We got to remind ourselves what to do.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think, it was one thing to say, hey, y'all, we were gone for a couple months, to be like, no, let's tell people why we were gone. And so I think that this is us modeling that behavior. So we're trying to practice what we preach and getting it out there, because we know we're not the only ones going through it right now. And that some of you are either going through fresh loss, new loss, or you are reminded of who's not there. So you got to find a way to move. Can you get beyond it? Yes. You get over it? No. But you can fill your life with experiences that helps to fill that space, right? So I think that's one way of doing it as well. But I think that's part of the technique. You've got to find a way to fill that space, whether it be rituals, new holidays, celebrations, new friends, new something, new ways to honor the people that you're missing. I think that's a way to really help you move through the process or to honor them. So it doesn't seem, so yes, you recognize the loss, but it turns more into a celebration of their life as opposed to missing them not being there in the physical form.
I would tell you, I probably for the first time in my career purposely took a couple of extra days off that I typically wouldn't. And part of that is because I have family coming in at different times. And so if I wanted to see that family, then I had to take the days off. But I can tell you in the past, I wouldn't have taken off. I would have been like, I'll see you for a couple hours after work or what have you. And so for me, that's a way my dad was always on me about that. And so it's a way for me to honor him, but it's also a way for me to make new memories and make new memories for my children kind of in his honor, right? Can we switch a little bit and talk about policies a little bit as well? Because
I think your last comment about taking the time off is a direct tie to that. That was going to be my follow-up to your comment, was that.
Well, look at that. We're on the same page.
But yeah, I think that's definitely it's something that as a leader, you should recognize as well, that we have policies that are written and they're there for a reason. But I think as we get into more human-centered leadership, a leadership that wants to foster belonging, that the policies we have are not always, they're not a one-size-fit-all for every situation, because some people will need the time, some people won't take the time. But I think it's understanding that you may have to be flexible in how you apply those policies. And I think the better time to revise those policies is when you're not having to apply them in a new situation. So don't all of a sudden your favorite employee is going through some grief and now you want to have flexible time off. Now you want to let them bring their pet to work, who's not a certified emotional support animal, because if they're certified, you have to let them. But depending on your work environment. But yeah, you want to do that in a point where someone is not experiencing it now. So if you're a leader and you can affect those policies and this episode resonates with you, look at how you treat leave or bereavement leave or just any of your other policies, right? So are you going to allow people to have time off when their dog passes away? That's tragic for some folks.
It is
very tragic. Very tragic. So, or do you say, but it's just a thing, it's not a person? No, don't say that. But I think this is the way you start to look at your policies, how they're applied, and there's an opportunity there for you to embrace some of these concepts and to build in a culture of belonging in the actual written document.
And I think this is also where if you start looking at your policy or thinking about your policy and how you want to form it, this is where you should really bring in some unheard of types of situations. Most bereavement gives you 3 to 5 days. I will tell you, just as an example of things that you would never think would happen. I got back in town from being on a work trip. 3 hours later, I got the call from my mom that my dad had passed. They were on vacation. They were supposed to return the next day. Actually, that day, anyway, it was the morning. And so now we were faced with the fact that it was a Friday. Police had to be called and all of that because he passed away in a hotel. We didn't know how we were going to get his body released because the weekend was coming and government doesn't really work on the weekends. We also had to figure out how we were going to transport his body back, all of those things. And yet here was my mom. Thankfully, they were visiting her sister, but here's my mom basically all alone in halfway across the country in a state. 3 to 5 days wasn't going to work very well for me, right? Mm-hmm. Luckily, I have siblings, and so we all kind of took shifts when we could. But, we needed that initial week to 2 weeks just to figure things out. But then when we planned the memorial service, it was a month later, and we needed the days to get family in town and run around. And because I was the person in town, there were so many things that I had to get done, and I had to welcome family and figure out hotel rooms and all of those logistics. And so luckily I'm in a position where I didn't have to worry about that. But if I had an employee who was faced with a similar situation, I was like, well, I'll give you an extra day, but you got to take your PTO or you got to use your sick time or I'm going to dock it or whatever. I think this is where we need to have that compassion. And not everybody needs it. And I know we're always worried about somebody taking advantage of it. Quite frankly, if somebody needs to take advantage, I will tell you, I fairly recently this year had 2 sisters who were employees together, and someone in their family, they said someone in their family passed away, and they took 3 days bereavement to travel to the funeral. And what they actually did was quit and blocked the agency while they were gone. So took advantage of this bereavement leave. It was a very weird and odd situation. But I'm telling you, it's an exception, but I'm throwing it out there because I think people are so worried about situations like that, right? And they're going to abuse it. Like in the grand scheme of life, 3 days off or a week off or you being flexible and showing up for your employees, the return on investment. So if we just want to talk money and take all the emotion and compassion out of it, the return on investment for being an agency and being a leader that shows up compassionately and flexibly and is willing to work through situations and has a policy that allows them to work through situations, your employees will stay longer, work harder, and be more effective and efficient in the long run. And so even if you think about a return on investment, you're going to save all the money that you lose on the few people who abuse the policy because you're not going to have to continuously hire and train and advertise and all of those things that cost a lot of money when you work for an agency that is very rigid and not understanding and people leave.
Right. It's about creating that culture of belonging where people have the psychological safety that they're going to, even if you have the assholes who take advantage of the policy, right? And I'll say that clearly because that's what they are, assholes, that you will, the other employees will at least still see that was there and that was your approach to when they allegedly were going through something that was significant and were experiencing loss. To your point, the dividends on that simple act of grace does have a direct impact on your bottom line, on your recruiting cycle, on the ability for you and your team to get work done. So I think that's critical. Right. So, but speaking of getting work done, I think that's another simple thing folks can do as well is when someone is going through that phase, whether 3 to 5 days or a week or even a month, like how can you reassign some duties? Do you have the capacity to take on some of their work, to distribute some of their work in a way so they can take the time they need for themselves and their family so they can return and be fully present and engaged moving forward? They're not going to be the same person, but they're not going to be suffering at the same level that they are initially when they're going through the initial loss, or if they're going through a period of just sadness during the holiday season. It's going to happen. And let's be clear, you'll probably have to deal with this twice. So again, I'll use you as an example, Natalie, like your father passed early in the year. Yeah. So it's dealing with it then, and then when the holidays roll around, that's the second leg to foot to fall. That is the second part of it that we have to deal with, and why we felt like it was necessary to do this episode in December, because it's, again, where it's a season of joy, it's also a season that amplifies loss. Yeah. It doesn't diminish it, it amplifies it. And so I think that's what makes it a bit more difficult, that no matter when someone has experienced loss, this part of the year, it gets amplified because of all the joy that they see everyone else going through. And they're missing their partner, their mama, their daddy, their child, whoever it may be. They are still feeling that, in addition to showing up to work and still celebrating the season. Because all of those three of those things can coexist. And I think that's part of what we want to get folks to, that there is an end to that. There is an end in sight. But you have to make space as an organization, as a leader, that they can coexist. So you're not pushing the grief to the side. You're going to embrace it. You're going to acknowledge it. You're going to be human. Deal with it and show it how to deal with it in your policies and deal with it on your team. And then I think that is where, again, to your point, that you get that ROI of, this is a great culture that people are really allowed to be human, and we still get and still get their job done.
Right. You mentioned shifting workload and trying to create the situation where if somebody does take time off, that they're not overloaded with everything that they have to get done. I think on the flip side, there are some people who have great loss and they don't have a lot of family. Like, I thankfully have family that I can fall back on, but some people, the one person who was in their life has passed away and they don't have activities and celebrations and distractions during this season. They only have the amplification of the loss. And for those of us who are type A, at least, and maybe some others too, I don't want to leave anyone out, but having a special project or having something where they can take all of that energy and put it towards something that they're excited about, something that's maybe a little new and different, something that has like a clear end. So if you do have special projects and you have a staff member or an employee who likes to do those things and dig in and is maybe looking for some distractions and extra time to work on things, that's another idea and thing to maybe put out there and put on the plate as well.
Yeah, because it's not even just having family, it's where those family are, where their family is. So for example, I don't have family here in Maryland. Right. Everybody's in St. Louis or in Florida, where both my uncle and my dad were, and my sister is. So that's different, right? I don't have the distractions of family other than my kids. I mean, like siblings and aunts, uncles, all that other stuff, right? So there are no other adults in the family around. There are no adults who are family to bring that bottle of bourbon open and sit with me, or we can go and just talk about our memories. So I think that's also a nuance. And another example, using my sister, who is in Florida, was very present in both their lives. So she's dealing with the estate stuff because he's local, but she's also raising 3 of our younger cousins. They're all under 12 or 12 and under. And so
I can relate to your sister.
But so my point being, though, that she's got to get up. She got to go to work. She runs a business. She got to get them kids ready for school. So she didn't have the flexibility that I have to be like, I'm setting a project or a team. You still got to find a way to, if they're open to it, that is a great way of keeping them involved. Because sometimes just having something to do,
right,
is a great way to keep your mind focused, because let's be clear, when you're grieving, your focus is not there. It's not. And so having that project is a great way to then maybe apply some focus for a period of time during the day. They have a reason to get up and do something because, oh, I got to finish this part of the project today. And then retreat again if they want to, or go back to where their process, or go back to their family. But I think that's another acknowledgement we should probably call out, is that people are not going to be as focused when they are experiencing that loss and that grief. So we need to account for that as managers and leaders as well, as leaders of people, is that we've got to be able not only to recognize it, see it, because again, sometimes the people won't see it themselves because they just don't know how they are responding. So your spidey sense that you've hopefully been developing all this time and has to really be on. It may be that you have to tell someone, you know what, go home. You're not all here today. And I understand why. Your job is secure. Come back tomorrow or the next day. But right now, go home.
Right.
And I think that leaders, when we're helping people through that period, that's okay to do. And again, I think it still helps to create that environment. I think it's clear to safe, and it's important to say, your job is safe. You have a home here. Yeah. You have space here, but take the time you need.
But you need to go.
Exactly. Because that's the last thing, you give them the time off, but then they're worried about, do I have a job to go back to? Is a whole other stress that we don't want to cause. So make sure that you are very intentional that if you're going to offer that flexibility and you're going to give them that grace, also let them have the security of knowing that their job is safe and they can come back to.
I also want to speak a little bit when you were talking about your sister, and this is probably also self-motivated, but women who have young children and who are the primary caregivers or single parents who are also leaders. You are leading the household. You have to get up because children need to get up and get ready for school and get out the door and get breakfast and all of those things that you have to orchestrate. And then you get to work where you have to still orchestrate everything and lead everything. And by the time you get off work, it's time to go get kids. And so it never stops. Mm-hmm. Even on the weekends, maybe you don't have work, but your household is still busy. And that's when you're making sure you get done all the things that make the household work. For those leaders, I think at work, especially thinking about what are the things that I can delegate, because chances are you're going to get to work, you're going to get to your office or wherever that is, and you're going to stop. Like at some point, your body is and your brain is just going to shut down, and be prepared for that moment. It's going to happen. Those moments are going to be bigger and others may be smaller, but those moments are going to come, and have somebody that can pick up without you having to train them, like be proactive about that, right? You should always have a second in command who can take over in your absence. Yeah. Hopefully your organization runs such that you could be gone for a month and it still runs fairly well. But think about those things and think about like who is or who are the couple of people that I can just tap out.
There are probably people listening who are leaders, but they also have a very small team and they're like, I can't take the time off. Then call in a colleague. So one of the things that I would preach and advise when I was working with small business owners who were normally the owner operator, when you're the owner operator, it's very hard to do that. You still need to develop, an advisory board, but what's your backup plan? What is your own succession planning for when life happens and you can't be there? So whether it be a colleague who's in the same industry as you, who knows what to do, a professional service provider, lawyer, accountant, whoever, somebody who can at least run the books, do the minimum stuff, whatever it is, have that plan in place. So when life happens, you have a turnkey plan that you can go to and say, hey, I have to go away for a week, family emergency, whatever it may be, that somebody has at least enough access to check the mail. Make sure that the security system is on. Respond to those urgent client deliverables that you were, even if they can't finish the deliverable, somebody's got to communicate with the client, right? So what is that? So have that plan in place. Even if you are a solo entrepreneur with a small team of consultants, whatever, you've got to figure out a way that how do you fill in the gaps when you are not able to provide the service? And I think that'll save you and your family a lot of headache when that time happens. Again, I can't stress it enough because it will happen, whether it be someone in your life, a family member, a friend, whatever. There's going to be something that requires your attention, that takes you away, that's not going to be a happy situation, that you're going to have to deal with loss, absence, grief, etc. But have a plan in place so that you're not trying to figure it out while you're grieving. Which would also be my tip, estate planning, folks. This is not a legal podcast, but it's the same thing. Get your wills, your power of attorney, your healthcare directive, get all that stuff in place, because the last thing you want is your family to have to deal with that while they're dealing with the loss of you or your incapacity. Get it done.
And make sure it's really clear. I can tell you from personal experience, my parents had things laid out really, really clear for what would happen if they both died. They weren't quite prepared for one to die. And I think very honestly, especially my dad, because my dad handled everything, literally just about everything. So while he did do a great job and had something as simple as he had a Word document of all his passwords, and yet there were 3 that were missing, and those 3 just happened to be fairly important ones. I have an app that goes on my Chrome. So no matter what computer I'm using, no matter what new login I have, it pops up just like Google does and says, do you want me to save your password? And I usually say yes to all 3 of them, because I don't know which one's going to crash or whatever. But my family needs one password and they can get into my whole life. Nobody cracked my password.
Change your password after we publish this podcast, just in case.
Yes, I now will have multiple new passwords. But I think, just thinking through that, right? So estate planning, but don't be general about it. Think about, and especially for business owners, you also need to think about what that means for your business. Because if your business is not in order, your significant other, your spouse, your family, whoever is going to be in charge of figuring that out is not going to know how. So not to sound grave, but you should operate in such a way that things can continue in your absence.
Yeah. And it's planning. If you think about it, it really is 10 to 20 hours of planning out of your life that you can spread out over a period of time, assuming you have that time. But it doesn't take a lot to get it done. Whether it's changing your policies in the office, making sure that you're properly insured, getting your estate plan together, all that stuff. But again, if you're leading, the best thing you can do in your team is to make sure your policies are set up in advance so that you have the options in place to afford your team members the time, space that they need to really properly grieve, properly get through the season, feel like they have a home to come back to or a job to come back to, and that they are welcome, and that everyone should have the same access to those benefits, access to that culture, and should feel that level of psychological safety that I don't have to worry about if I have a job to come back to because I have to deal with a personal tragedy.
Right. I think on that note, hopefully we've given you a few chunks and things to try out, to consider as you hopefully redevelop your new policies as you go into the new year. And also, if you are a leader or an employee that is managing grief right now, some positive ways to manage that. Again, Anthony said, it's not about pushing it aside. It's about embracing it and moving through it. And I think the better we all can get at doing that, the better we can create environments that are safe for people, that people can show up as they are, whether they're at their best self or their grieving self or somewhere in between.
Yep. Because it starts with you as the leader. Because why? Belonging starts at the top.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Belonging at the Top. We hope it sparked new ideas for fostering belonging in your leadership journey. If you found it insightful, please like and subscribe to our podcast for more thought-provoking discussions. We'd also love it if you could share it with others who might benefit from the conversation. If you have any feedback or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please email us or drop us a note on Instagram or LinkedIn.